This is Global Forum TV. In our new series today, India 2025, we bring you eminent personalities from India and share their vision, comments and opinions about what India would look like in 2025. This is your host, Ameena, Saeed.
The mantra to understand India is Gandhi. Once you understand Gandhi, then you know the way out is there.
If you are going to promote chauvinism of the majority, or what I call chauvinism of the majority, either through the BJP, the opposition party, Janata Party, or otherwise through one of its ancillaries of what is called the Sangh Parivar, you're going to atomize the Indian political scene.
Rift is going to be China.
Okay.
India will become, as far as some of the core issues of the world are concerned, the global laboratory. Income inequalities have never been more explosive than they are today. I mean, this is it's always been an unequal and hierarchical society.
India is a very stabilizing force. Indian history, Indian culture, and Indian population, the Indian immigrants abroad, all this shows that India is an extraordinarily stabilizing force with the capacity for integration.
The whole world is looking at India as the future of this entire globe.
A great country, a proud country, but a country which under capitalism is unfortunately very much unequal. A country in which a part is the urban India and the rest is rural Bharat.
Hello, welcome to Global Forum TV, a platform for global issues with global perspectives in today's global village. In this segment of Global Forum, we bring you the next phase of our India 2025 series with yet another eminent personality, Mr. Nihal Singh. Welcome to Global Forum, Mr. Nihal Singh. Nihal Singh has spent many years as a foreign correspondent for the statesmen in Southeast Asia, Pakistan and East and West Europe. He spent 2 years as a senior associate for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in New York to complete a book on Indo-Soviet relations, The Yogi and the Bear. He spent another 2 years, mostly in Paris, to undertake a critical study of UNESCO, the rise and fall of UNESCO. Some of Nihal Singh's other publications are Malaysia, a commentary, From the Jhelum to the Volga, Indira's India and the Gang, and 900 Million, a China diary. Nihal Singh received the International Editor of the Year Award in New York in 1978 for his role as editor of the Statesman during the Indian emergency of 1975 to 77. Welcome to Global Forum, Mr. Nihal Singh. How do you see India on the world scene today?
Well, I think I see it as an emerging power in the world today with bright prospects in many respects. Also with a lot of problems domestically and in the neighborhood, apart from the wider world. So it's going to be, in the Chinese sense, interesting times. When the Chinese say interesting times, they mean tumultuous times and troublesome times.
Okay. What is India's globalization strategy and where do you see India in 2025 on the global scene?
Well, I think India is fumbling for a global strategy. I don't think it has got one ready-made. I think every country is trying to cope with globalization, whether it's a developed country or a developing country. And India has obvious problems in terms of safeguarding its more vulnerable people, for one thing. In terms of the, say, small trader, as far as retail trade is concerned, which is a matter of great concern these days, with multinationals wanting to come in, and in several other respects. How I see India, I think I see India as a significant power in the region, certainly, and I would imagine that it would have influence in the wider world more than it has today in terms of its growth and development and prospects.
You see India as a significant power despite the fact that it lacks a lot of infrastructure.
Yes. Infrastructure is being built. Of course, we've been very slow in it, and we're still bad in so many respects. But I think India has this capacity of muddling along, or as the British say, muddling through. And I think we'll muddle through as far as infrastructure is concerned.
Where will India be in 2025 in relation to super and regional powers?
I think it will be one of the significant powers in the region. If we are talking about Asia, I see China is obviously, but also Japan and India as three significant powers. And they will have an impact on the wider world, obviously, because of the mass of people, because of Japanese industry and strength, China's growing economic and military strength, as India's is particularly in the economic sphere. So it will rank as one of the main powers, yes.
If we were to assume that by 2025, China, India, Japan, Russia, Brazil, European Union and the USA will be the major powers in the world, then what kind of possible alliances and rifts do you see among these powers?
I think we're going to see an age of balancing of powers, because I think that the mantra of the future, as I see it, is going to be each country trying to maximize its relations with the other significant powers. And there will be not quite the 19th century European balance of power, which we have all read in history books, but somewhat different kind, but still a balance of power among, say, 5 or 6 conglomerates or countries, which are significant powers. And obviously the effort of everybody will be to maximize its relations with the others.
Where do you see the rift between India and which country would you see there might be a possible rift?
Well, the possibilities of rifts are there, and especially in relation to the United States, for the simple reason that it's the preeminent power in the world. And there are obviously going to be divergences between India and the United States in terms of foreign policy and other interests. There are convergences, of course, we all know that. So I think the danger is if the Americans think they can sort of make India a kind of a sheriff of theirs, that is where the problems will arise. Because I do not think that India will agree to be just a proxy to the United States, or whichever the party in power.
What issues will define the relationship among the superpowers? Will it be water, oil, energy, technology, markets, population, or something else?
I think it will be a whole mix of them. You can't single out one. Energy obviously is a very, very important thing, because everybody is scrambling for energy. Trade and economic relations again are very important, as we see from the China-US relationship, for instance. And there are other sectors in terms of technology which India is trying to acquire, and which will again be an important facet. So I would say that there's a whole complex of issues that will determine their relationships, not a single issue.
Okay. What will be India's major strength in the global village?
One, I think the major strength would be the fact that India has a very large young population, many of them qualified. Obviously, there are a vast number of graduates who will need to be retrained or trained for technology, because many of their skills are not good enough, as we have seen by the IT industry majors who are taking in engineers and then putting them through the rule book and further training. But that is obviously going to be a major aspect of Indian strength. Secondly, I think India is going to offer more and more of a market for the world's industries, and hence the interests of the other countries in India will develop, as we see from the rush of the major world retailers like Walmart, etc., trying to enter the Indian market despite the restrictions. These are the two important aspects, I think, that will determine India's interactions.
Despite the fact that India has a dynamic and growing middle class of about 300 million strong, it has an equally large underclass. What will it be its condition in 2025?
Well, I think I see them still struggling, but I see them being less poor than they are today. But this is one of the dilemmas of development, which we see much more acutely in China today than in India, but obviously we are, which is basically the fact that if you develop very quickly, you leave a larger number of people behind, and you make people poorer than they were because of the globalization aspect, because of the fact that the higher qualified the people, the richer they are. Thirdly, as we have seen, especially again in China, much more than India, but in India too, it's obvious that the really rich, or the new rich, nouveau riche as they say, like to flaunt their wealth on ostentatious living and celebrations, and like weddings and birthday parties and so on, which I think is a very, very difficult thing for the poorer people to bear. And there you have social conflicts coming in a big way. In China, for instance, there have been thousands of protests in the villages because they have lost their land through not only development but corruption, which is a major factor in China as well as in India. So these are the problems we'll have to wrestle with, and I think unless we have a social base as we progress, we are in for trouble.
What elements of India's soft power or smart power will pave the way for its rise in the world?
Well, as we have seen, the IT industry, the information technology industry, has been the standard bearer of the new India, so to speak. And I think here the fact that Indian IT people have done so well in the United States, in the Silicon Valley in particular, is very important, because that gave the world the awareness of the Indians and the strength of the Indians in terms of technology, in terms of software and so on. So that is obviously one area which is very important for India as a thrust area. But I think we'll have to develop in areas like biotechnology, which is becoming very, very important, nanotechnology, and the whole range of the frontier technologies. Yes, certainly.
Biofuels, etc. To what extent India's internal fourth lines of caste, region, religion, and abject poverty for millions of its citizens limits its role as a world power?
Well, caste, of course, is a factor that often pulls people back, but it's a part of the matrix, and we can't change it in overnight or in
But do you think
even
it is
in.
changing? Do you think
It is gradually changing in terms of urbanization and industrialization and so on, but it is still very much there. Religion again is one of the problem areas in terms of deciding the future of the country in a sense, because we are very large, for instance, the Muslim population, but there are others like Sikhs and Gans and various others, Christians. And if you are going to promote chauvinism of the majority, or what I call chauvinism of the majority, either through the BJP, the opposition Bharatiya Janata Party, or otherwise through one of its ancillaries of what is called the Sangh Parivar, you're going to atomize the Indian political scene to the great disadvantage of India. So we have to be very careful about that.
And you think that there might be drawbacks? They might be drawing India back?
Certainly, to the extent that you, for whatever reasons, whether political, opportunistic, or we believe in things, if you're going to emphasize the divides in India, especially in terms of religion, you're asking for trouble. Because here you are discussing, I mean, they're called minorities, but you know, if you're talking 150 million people,
Right.
I mean, it's
a
rather,
nation in itself.
yes. So, yes. So obviously you're going to have trouble unless you can cope with that.
What are the worst best case scenario for India by 2025?
Worst case is that we will get into this religious business. Religious business in terms of the antagonistic aspects of
You
religion.
mean we'll be politicizing religion?
Yes,
a lot
which is,
more?
yes, a lot more. The best is that there'll be more people to on the ladder of prosperity and happiness, at least that we have the basics of life for everybody, which is the least a modern nation state can do.
What are the worst, best case scenario for North-South relations in 2025? How will it impact India?
Well, North-South relations are going to be problematic anyway for a long time, particularly if you consider the African continent, which is the least well off, I think, in the world of all the continents. The basic problem is that as all the various developing countries summits of one kind or another, whatever the label you put on them, have revealed, there is really not enough South-South cooperation. Okay. And that is a basic problem, because obviously the developed countries have their own interests and their own worries and so on. But unless you can promote South-South cooperation in a real meaningful way, of course, like the BRIC countries, Brazil, South Africa, India, for instance, and China. Right. If that can really get going in real terms, it would be something. But basically, that's the problem in my view.
Could you give an example of what you think the South-South may help each other in order to do something meaningful?
To begin with, to trade with each other.
Okay.
Instead of course, the colonial pattern was that every developing country traded with the metropolitan power, which is understandable. Yeah. But we are 60 years down the line now after independence, and the other countries maybe not 60 but 50 or 40. And still, if you look at this trade between the developing countries among themselves, it is ludicrous.
What kind of relationship you see between India and Pakistan in 2025, and what will be the shape of South Asia?
I would imagine that as we are witnessing in recent years or recent months, that there will be much greater people-to-people contact and much greater trade and economic relations despite the problems. I would imagine that there would be greater realism by the leaderships of the two countries in terms of accommodating each other's sensitivities and seeing the benefits of a peaceful neighborhood.
Where do you see the largest Indian minority, namely the Indian Muslims, placed in the emerging Indian superpower scenario?
Well, I would expect more and more Muslims, for instance, to come into the mainstream, because one of the problems is, for various historical, social and other reasons, political reasons, that Muslims have, or large sections of Muslims have tended to stay in their own sort of, some in their ghettos, but largely in their own environment, an exclusive environment. And the main problem is to get them out of there into the mainstream. Here, of course, the difficulty, as we all know, is that there are prejudices on the other side too, as we all know, and there are hindrances and obstacles. But I would imagine that there will be many more Muslims who are in the mainstream of tomorrow, India of tomorrow.
At this point, there are about 2% Muslims who are in administrative services or military, whereas their population representation in society is anywhere from 12 to 15%. So the fact that they are quite marginalized will take a long time. What do you attribute the reason to for this marginalization?
Well, some of the reasons are historical, and in terms of at the time of partition, the better educated or the well-off people had the means to move to a new environment or a new country sort of, whereas the poorer people had no choice. They had to stay on. So you took away the cream, so to speak, of Muslims to build the new nation, which you needed, of course, to build Pakistan. That is one factor. The other is that if you have divisive politics of the BJP or Sangh Parivar kind, then obviously it encourages against the Muslims or the main minority in India. And thirdly, I think I would blame some of the traditional Muslim leaders who themselves try to keep their flock separate from the mainstream because they are very valuable vote banks and they can, get elected to various things. They are the middlemen to negotiate with the powers that be on behalf of the Muslims. Right. So there are these sets of
You think
problems.
one of the problems is leadership, proper leadership for Muslims?
I think so, certainly. I mean, not only Muslims but also Sikhs.
Okay.
That's important.
We talked about India-Pakistan. Do you think that the Kashmir problem will be resolved, or do you think it will continue?
Well, I don't know about resolution, what you mean by it, but I think I can see it put to the side and being a less irritating factor between the two countries. Because as you see, the India-China relationship and our long border dispute is going on and on.
Yes.
By and large, India has decided to say, okay, I mean, we can't solve it immediately, let's put it aside, sort of thing. So I see that more and more, yes.
But this is more dynamic. There is strife, and there are...
No, there are greater passions because after all we are one people,
Yes.
kind of thing, and of course, as you know, animosities between old cousins or brothers are very deep.
There is a globalization force that is overtaking everyone. Will India be forced to change some of its norms, values and attitudes in the near future?
I think that's already changing. If you
In what way would you like to expand on that?
Well, socially, I think, for instance, if you look at page 3 of newspapers, in Indian newspapers, page 3 is traditional society circuit. You see women now holding glasses of wine, at least, if not whiskey. You see many more Indian women wearing Western clothes than they used to, at least at a certain level. I think you see a little less inhibition in societal mores, whether it's sexual or otherwise. So obviously, things
Are
going
there
to
really any changes in the content of the Indian psyche? Could you point out at one?
Well, I would expect it to be more tolerant in a way of change than otherwise. But of course the essence is different. The essence, I think, Indian society is still rooted in the essence of old Indian values.
Will the role of religion in Indian public life increase or decrease in the next 20 years?
My regret is that I wouldn't call it religion, but religiosity.
You mean politicization of religion?
Yes, and the sort of ostentatious manifestations of religion rather than politicization.
Give me an example.
Well, you see all the various political dues, starting with the prayers and that kind of thing, which has not been the case before. You see the kind of people who normally would be secular, or you consider secular, sort of mouthing slogans which are semi-religious and so on. So there is this tendency to pander to what I call this ostentatious show of religion.
What 3 words would you use to describe India as you see it today?
I would make it 2 words.
Okay.
Incredible India. That's the campaign, the advertisement campaign, as you know.
You have to give me one more word because it's incredible, and then one more, and then India.
Incredible, chaotic India.
Okay, we got it. Is there anything that appalls you about a developing country, especially India?
Well, there's so many things.
Like
It'll be like poverty, like bigotry, like, religious divides. Because to me, religion is a matter of personal practice and belief,
Right.
not a public display kind of a thing. Corruption. I'd like to see corruption diminish, if not disappear.
Is there anything that inspires you about India? What is your source of inspiration?
Well, I think that there are still people who are idealistic committed people, some of them in the leadership, but in the political establishment, but many more outside the political establishment. There are people fighting their lone battles against authority of various kinds, much more so than used to be the case. I think the middle class has flowered to a certain extent, or at least sections of it, to take on challenging the government or the authorities for justice in various fields, which is encouraging. And I think I would go back to the old leadership like Nehru and so on as inspiration.
After Nehru, do you see anybody who might fill the space, or is it impossible?
We are too close, I think, to know.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Mr. Nihal Singh. I'm glad you made some time for us for Global Forum TV. Thank you.
Thank you.